Well, I am so honored to be here, Governor Romney. And it's fun to sit down and let people kind of get to know you, how all the people that know you intimately speak so highly of you. And it's kind of one of those opportunities where I get to ask you some questions about how you are as a person, as a dad and a grandpa. I was meeting recently with your son, Josh, and he told about a trip you guys do every summer. You take your grandkids to all the national parks around Utah. So I wanted to ask, did you do that again this year?
Yeah, that was this year. And actually, it's not every summer. We wait until we have a group of grandkids that reach the age of 11, 12, 13. They're old enough to sort of remember what they see, but not yet teenagers to be bothered by everything that Grandpa does. So we get a group of 4 or 5 and put them in our van, and then we go to the national parks in Utah, and also to that's the Mighty Five in Utah, and then also to Grand Canyon, and to Havasupai. Havasupai is a Indian village down at the bottom of the Grand Canyon, and you hike down in there. It's got fabulous waterfalls. This year we had difficulty getting there because they had flash floods, so we couldn't get in. But yeah, we did it this summer, and it's really fun to be with the grandkids, get to know them. We sort of double bunk, so I don't get too many hotel rooms. We go from hotel to hotel, but we all sort of stay together.
Well, what a cool opportunity for them. I mean, that's a trip, as a kid, those are the things you always remember when you get older, those trips with grandpa or dad and everything else. So what a cool opportunity for them to get that one-on-one time with you.
Well, I'm sort of following a family tradition because my dad did this. One, he did this with me and my brother and my 2 sisters when we were younger. He took us around to the national parks here in Utah, and then also Arizona and California. But then after we started having kids, he would get a group of 4, 5, 6 grandkids together and do the same trip. He took them for 30 days.
Wow.
30 days. And I would have loved to have done that for 30 days. I only get like 10 days because the kids today have so many lessons. And EFY at BYU, and they have soccer camp, and just one camp after the other. So I couldn't get that many days in a row, so only 10 days.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, what a cool family tradition to be able to carry on and do that. So what were you like as a kid? I mean, you're going on these trips with your dad and different things. What was Mitt Romney like as a child? Were you always into business and politics, or what were you like as a little kid?
I was the baby of the family. So that meant that on trips like this, I was a little young to remember the stuff that was going on, although I remember scenes with Mom and Dad. And my dad pioneered the Rambler automobile, and it had a front seat that laid down. So we would lie the seat down, and we could sleep in the car as he was driving us around. So I do remember that distinctly. But the great advantage of being the baby in the family was not so much on these trips, as much as it was that when the older siblings left the nest, if you will, when my brother Scott left, he was 6 years older than me. That meant I was home alone, and Dad took me to work. I could see what he was doing at work. I'd listen to his meetings. He took me around. He was the head of a car company, so he took me around to the engineering department to see the work they were doing on engines and transmissions. He also took me to the design department, so I could see cars being mocked up in clay that would be coming out in 4, 5, and 6 years. This was very exciting to a guy who at the time was maybe 14.
Yeah, for sure.
And a little younger, actually. And so I got to see my dad and Mom in a way my brother and sisters didn't. That's the advantage of being the baby in the family.
Oh, that's awesome. What a great opportunity that would be. Well, and so you, after high school, graduate, ended up at BYU, and then you met your wife, Ann. Tell us a little bit about the story where you guys met. I think I've heard you tell it before, but I think it's one of those stories that you just light up every time you tell it. So I think our audience would love to hear it.
Well, I mean, we probably bumped into each other in elementary school.
Yeah.
But she was 2 grades behind me, so that was a whole different category. So we were not in the same league in elementary school. When we got to high school, she was a sophomore, I was a senior, and it was March of my senior year when I went to a party at Stu White's house, and she had come with some other guy. She was just about 16, just turning 16. I was 18. And, I saw her there, and she was very different than I remembered from earlier years. She was gorgeous and vivacious. And I went and spent some time talking to her. And then I said to the guy that had given her ride there, I said, hey, look, I live closer to Ann than you do. So why don't I take her home for you? I can save you the drive. So he agreed. That was his big mistake.
Yeah.
I took her home, and we spent some time talking in the car. Believe it or not, on this first visit, I gave her a kiss, and she was remarkably cool. All right, she didn't show much interest in me, and I, of course, found that very, very compelling. I showed more and more interest in her, and the more interest I showed in her, the more standoffish she was. She was setting the hook very, very deep. And so it was probably a week or two later, we went on our first official date. We went to see The Sound of Music, which was just a brand new movie at the time. Went downtown Detroit in my dad's car, and I had a rose there for her, and that was the beginning. I was hooked, and we've been dating and in love ever since.
Wow. I think those old-fashioned stories, that's what I remember the most of. It's just one of those good old-fashioned stories, the rose, the kiss on the first date. I think it's changed so much nowadays. Do you worry maybe for your grandkids or things like that people don't have those same opportunities to have that romantic relationship like that from the beginning?
I don't know what it's going to be like going forward. I do notice that it's a growing trend in America that people, one, don't go on dates, and number two, don't get married as young as we did. I mean, we got married. Ann was 19, I was 21. And now people are getting married later and later and later. That means that they will be having fewer kids, just mathematically. You're not going to have as many kids. Family size is declining. The population of America, from those that are, if you will, native born, is declining. And so immigration is a very important part of our future in order to maintain our population or to grow it. So, yeah, there's some real changes. I can't predict precisely what will happen. Yeah. I can tell you, I think people will miss the married years that I enjoyed. I'm happy that I found Ann young, and we found each other young and had our kids young, because now, by the way, they're all out of the nest, yeah. And we're able to enjoy each other, when we're not walking around with a cane.
Yeah, you're able to spend the time taking your grandkids and doing amazing trips and things like that. Well, so why did you decide to get into business? I mean, afterwards, you set up, obviously, Bain Capital and this huge company, this conglomerate. How did you decide the decision to go into that?
Well, I had a battle with my dad. My dad was convinced that I needed to get a law degree and become a lawyer. He thought that was important. I thought a business degree was more important. We compromised, and I did both, business and law. I've got degrees in both. And I probably didn't need that law degree. I was right, he was wrong. But business is where I wanted to go. And my first job was in the consulting industry. I had tried in some summer jobs to work in a corporation. I worked at Chrysler Corporation, for instance, and I was so far removed from anything important. There were just scads of people. It was so bureaucratic. I'm told today it's not like that in the auto industry, but it was then. I didn't want anything to do with big corporate America, so I went to a consulting firm, worked there for a while, and at some point my boss said, what do you think about starting a venture capital and private equity firm? And I said, I'd love to, but let's study it first. And we spent a year looking at it and raising money, and raised our first huge fund, $37 million. Today people laugh at that, but to us that was just unbelievable money. And we used that to invest in several businesses, and that was really my career. Consulting for about a decade, and then venture capital and private equity over the next 15 years.
Gotcha. What was your favorite part of the consulting and the private equity? Do you have a kind of a favorite story that came out of that, a company that maybe you guys helped? I know you helped turn around a lot of companies and things like that. Do you have a favorite time of that?
Well, consulting was interesting and challenging at the same time, in that it was exciting to be working on very, very important problems, and to be interacting with the senior executives in an enterprise to try and help them become more effective. We had a whole series of clients, for instance, in the healthcare industry, working with hospitals and pharmaceutical companies and so forth, which I found very, very interesting. But private equity was different, which is, instead of just offering advice to someone that you tried to help them implement, you now actually were taking decisions yourself and guiding an enterprise that you had invested other people's money in. And that presented a new degree of stress, but also a thrill of success when success occurred. And there were moments when you saw things that didn't work out, and you learned from that as well. We had a number of businesses that did not succeed, where we lost all of our money. We had others that we made many times our money. And the good made up for the bad. But it was a very powerful learning experience. And there are some that I look at and say that was absolutely fantastic. There were some companies we started. The most famous was probably Staples, where we put the very first money in Staples and helped them open their very first store. I was there on Soldiers Field Road at night, helping stock the shelves and making sure that we were ready for grand opening the next day. These are the kinds of things you do in a small business like the one I was in.
Was it hard to balance, because you had kids, you already had kids during this time frame? Was it hard to balance your work life and your family life, and how did you manage that?
I had an experience in law school that really informed how I would interact with my family. And it's kind of a strange thing, but when I was in law school, I was convinced that because I was a graduate of Brigham Young University from Utah, that I couldn't possibly compete with these guys from Harvard and Yale at Harvard Law School. So I had to work like crazy and figured I'd flunk out. So all the time I was in law school, it was like there's this big black cloud hanging over me, which is you got to study more, you got to go to the library, you got to study more. And I didn't get a lot of sleep. And it was just oppressive. And at one point I said, I ought to really try living the law of the Sabbath. And I don't mean to project this on other people, but I said, I'm going to take one day a week and not study at all. And I'm going to go to church and I'm going to be with my family all day. And what happened was I noted that there was this remarkable lifting of the dark cloud, because for one day I didn't feel guilty for not studying. It's like, no, I'm not going to study today. And I continued that when I got into business. I said to my boss, Bill Bain, look, I'm happy to join the firm, but you should know something about me. I really can't work on Sunday, unless there's some emergency that calls me to come in to help a client or whatever, but I'm not going to work on Sunday. And that's just the way I need to do it. And he said, fine. And that worked out. And so for me, Sunday was always a family day and a church day. And then I also had a practice. When I came home at the end of my workday, which was typically a little later than most folks, I got home 7:30 or 8, I didn't bring a briefcase full of work that I'd sit down and work on. When I came home, the briefcase was set by the door, and my time was entirely focused on Ann and the kids. And that also was a great source of energy for me, and it gave me real interaction time with them and made them understand what was most important to me.
Yeah.
I wish I'd have had more time to spend on all the things I cared about: my church job, my community service, my work job, and my family. I used to joke that if you have several things you're doing and all of them are getting shortchanged, then you've got your life in balance.
Well, I like to think that I take massive action towards one thing that needs it the most without neglecting the rest. It seems like that's kind of what you would do. When you were with your family, you were with your family. When you were working, and were able to put that focus on that.
Yeah, I know a lot of folks when they're traveling, they're on the airplane, they're watching movies, they're reading books, they're relaxing because they've had a hard day perhaps before the airplane flight. For me, if I was outside the house, I was working. I was, doing casework. I was doing work on clients. I was every moment away from the home was entirely focused on doing the job at hand. And my relaxation time, that was at home with the kids and on Sunday.
Gotcha. So you have this life, you're building this company, you're doing great. You decide first to go into the Olympics, but then you decide to run for president. Well, first governor, then president. I want to kind of touch base on the president part of it. When was the moment you knew, I'm going to run for president?
I don't know that I can put a specific moment on it. There were times when we were facing a decision and we didn't know what to do, and we made it a matter of prayer and contemplation and a discussion between Ann and me, and we made a decision. The first time we did that was with regards to, well, I should say the first, but regards to politics, was the decision to run for the United States Senate against Ted Kennedy, knowing I would lose. Barring some miracle, I wasn't going to beat Ted Kennedy in Massachusetts.
Right.
But it came as a bit of a surprise to us, but we decided to get into it. And that moment I can clearly remember and can define when the moment occurred. Likewise, the decision to come to the Olympics was that kind of moment. The decision to run for governor was that. But the decision to run for president was a longer process, which is sort of gradually backing into it and recognizing it was something I needed to do, that it would have significance whether I won or lost. I hoped to win. I thought I could win. I wanted to win. I think the country would have been better if I'd have won. But those are decisions have come in different ways, and I have had some decisions made in a very clear and stark way, and others are much more of a process where I have stepped forward in faith, feeling I'm doing the right thing. I know this is the right thing, but I have to just step ahead.
No, I think it's great advice, and one way or another, it seems to always work itself out. But, well, when you were running for president, obviously that was a huge campaign over several years, but what was your favorite part of being the representative of the Republican Party and running for president?
There are probably two parts. The most enjoyable part of the campaign is actually sitting down and meeting with individuals or families. So before a rally or before a finance event, my team would organize a group of 4 or 5 couples, typically, or perhaps a home with a family, and I'd get to spend a half an hour to an hour talking to them about what their concerns were, what they hoped would happen in the election, and those were very enjoyable conversations where I got to get a better sense of the people who don't make the news, people who have normal lives, and you come away greatly impressed with the character of the people of our country. And then, of course, there are the great celebratory events like the Republican Convention where people are cheering you on and encouraging you to beat, in this case, your opponent. My opponent was Barack Obama, to take him on and to succeed. And to see your family and be part of that kind of a celebration is also a high point.
Yeah, what a great experience for them to just be that involved with the government in general and the country, the greatest country on the earth. But you've decided to jump back into politics, running for senator here in the state of Utah. And what was your why, I guess, is what I would want to ask, for getting back into politics here in Utah?
Well, I'm a bit surprised to be doing it. I thought Orrin Hatch was going to run for re-election. He actually asked me in January of 2017 if I would support him and endorse him. I said absolutely. Agreed to do a fundraiser for him. So he surprised me later on when he decided not to run. He gave me a bit of a warning before the official designation. But Ann and I discussed it and felt that by virtue of my 25 years in business and my experience with the Olympics and with the people in Utah and that experience, but also my political experience, that I was in a position to, if you will, help Utah, if you will, punch above its weight, and to be able to do more for Utah and Washington than anyone else that might consider a race. It's a Republican Senate, so there ought to be a Republican senator from Utah if you want to have a seat at the table. And my experience and relationship in Washington with Republican senators and the president would allow me to get more done. And this is, I think, a critical time for the country. So, again, we felt a sense of obligation, duty, as well as a thrill of being able to represent a great state in a great country.
Well, I think there's a lot of excitement around it, so it'll be fun to watch as the process continues and kind of what comes of that. So I think we're all, as Utahns, grateful to have somebody like yourself be able to represent us as well. So we thank you for running, because you didn't have to. You're in your 70s now, and you have an opportunity to do about whatever you want with your life. I guess the last question that I would ask you is, what advice do you have for young people in general? Like, you probably get asked so much for business and politics, people looking to go into those fields. Last question, just what advice do you have for younger people as they're coming up?
Well, I got a lot of advice. One is if you find someone you're in love with, marry them. 2 is if you're thinking about having kids, do. Because kids will be a great challenge, a nightmare, a headache, but also some of the most thrilling experiences in life are being part of the education and the development of another person. In their professional life, I think it's important to recognize that your success is not defined by your promotions or how much money you make. That your success as an individual is much more defined by your relationship with your family, with your friends, with your God, You see, in business and in the world of politics, there's too much serendipity at play. There's too much that's out of your control. But your relationship with others and friends and faith, those are things that are very much in your own control. And how you define yourself and feel about yourself should be defined by those things. And sure, you want to have a job that's exciting and energizing, but that's not the way that you define who you are as an individual and the success you have in life. With regards to your job, my experience is every time I changed a job, I thought I'd made a terrible mistake, that the new company was not right for me, that I wish I could have gone back. 6 months later, I was delighted that I had not gone back, that I'd taken the new job. And new experiences are terrific and life-shaping. So my own view is that the currency in life is the people you love and the people that you have as friends. And when life is all over and you look to see how wealthy you are, it's not your bank statement, but instead, if you will, your Christmas card list or your holiday card list, depending upon your faith, that of the people that you care about and that care about you. And that's what brings you the greatest satisfaction.
That's such a great answer. I appreciate that. And it really is all about the relationships. And so thank you so much, Governor Romney. This has been a pleasure. I think everybody will love this interview and get to know you a little bit more. So thank you so much.
Thanks. Good to be with you.
All right. Thank you.